Our cover story tonight is about America's vicious legacy in West Asia. How it trampled upon international rules to commit human rights violations, how it undermined international institutions to cover up its war crimes, and how it used its global clout to evade all responsibility for its actions. This story needs to be told because had it been any other country, the very same United States of America wouldn't have thought twice before slapping sanctions on them. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. An airstrike that killed civilians in Syria, innocent women and children. What's new, you may ask? American airstrikes have a history of killing the wrong targets, of innocent people. But these airstrikes were kept off the records. These airstrikes were covered up. The US military hid them both at the front line and at the highest level of command. The airstrikes took place on the 18th of March 2019 in the town of Baghouz in eastern Syria. Back then, this town was the last stronghold of the Islamic State. The American military got a tip-off about terrorists hiding among civilians. It was unclear who was a combatant and who wasn't. The military decided to act nonetheless. A classified American Special Operations Unit took up the task. It dropped 2 consecutive bombs on a large group of people. Reports say this was despite drone footage showing the presence of civilians in the area. Meaning, they knew there were civilians. But American military commanders completely overlooked their presence. They did not issue any warning to the civilians. They just went ahead with the strikes. A total of 80 people were killed, 80 people killed. How many of these were terrorists? 16 apparently. This is according to the US Central Command's findings. It says the bombs killed 16 terrorists and 4 civilians. That adds up to 20. What about the rest? 60 other people died. Who were they? The American military has refused to identify them. It says they could be civilians. According to a New York Times report, analysts sitting at the Air Operations Center in Qatar, the ones which monitor such drone strikes, are said to have acknowledged that most of them were unarmed women and children, yet no investigation was launched. The entire operation was covered up. It was never acknowledged publicly by the US military. One officer tried flagging the strike as a possible war crime. But the US military ensured that all such efforts were concealed. The death toll was downplayed, the blast site was bulldozed, top leaders were not notified, and all reports were either delayed, sanitized, or classified. It was a colossal cover-up. Well, now it's out in the open. Personnel directly involved in the operation are said to have confessed that their leaders were hell-bent on hiding this catastrophe. The question is why? Why did America hide it? Accountability doesn't hurt democracies, it only makes them stronger. Clearly, the American military did not understand this or believe this. It feared that an admission would open a can of worms, put the spotlight on the many civilians that were killed in America's forever wars. It's hard to put a number, but according to a group monitoring America's wars, the US Army has conducted as many as 100,000 airstrikes since 2001. 100,000. Do you know how many civilians have died in these airstrikes? At least 22,000. That's one estimate. Other human rights bodies say the figure could be as high as 48,000. 48,000 civilians killed in American airstrikes in the last 20 years. Does this sound like a stretch to you? Consider the number of US airstrikes that have gone wrong in the last few years, and it might sound like an underestimation. In 2003, when the war on terror officially began, US airstrikes in Iraq killed at least 5,529 civilians. It was the deadliest year for civilian victims of US airstrikes, and it set the precedent for the next 2 decades. America killed civilians and then evaded all responsibility by labeling it as a mistake. That's it, a mistake. I'll give you more examples. 2010, a drone strike in Afghanistan's Uruzgan province killed 23 civilians. The Pentagon responded by, quote-unquote, criticizing the drone crew. Look at the headline on your screen. The Pentagon criticized them, but it did not investigate their actions. How do hollow words help? What's the point of this criticism? Then in 2015, a US airstrike devastated an Afghan hospital run by Doctors Without Borders. It killed 42 civilians. A US military probe refused to call it a war crime. Instead, it labeled it as a mistake caused by a combination of human error and equipment failure. How convenient. It's appalling how casually America dealt with such heinous crimes. For 20 years, it killed people and shrugged. Labeled its crimes as righteous strikes, blamed the killings on human error and did nothing to bring the culprits to task. And this, by the way, is the country that calls itself the beacon of human rights. How does America get away with all of this? Because the world will not hold it responsible or accountable, and American citizens don't seem to care. According to a Stanford research, almost half of Americans are willing to allow a war crime. They are willing to let a massacre of innocent women and children go unpunished if they believe that the act was committed by soldiers fighting for a just cause. The cause justifies the end. The US military has given itself the moral license to kill innocent people and let its crimes go unprobed and unpunished. And by the way, killing civilians is just one of the many kinds of crimes that they're guilty of. The other is arming rogue regimes and terror outfits, letting its weapons fall into the hands of non-state actors. Look at these images. This is a military parade that the Taliban conducted recently. They flaunted state-of-the-art American and NATO weapons. They have Humvees, helicopters, assault rifles, all thanks to Joe Biden and his team. And of course, the American taxpayers who sponsored these weapons. Let me end this report with a reminder for the United States, and this is something that I've said in the past. When you arm deadly terror outfits, when you kill innocents in the name of wiping out terror, when you cover your war crimes and justify murder in the name of a noble pursuit, you become more dangerous than the terrorists you claim to fight. You become the bigger threat to the world. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.